scary stories. I once met up with an old friend of mine, a friend that I had known for a few years prior to the meetup in November of 2017. I had actually met this person on a dating site. However, as time went on, the relationship between us became strictly platonic. There were no red flags, but my gut did not warn me, so I completely trusted this person. We met up in town, behind a bus station, on a grassy hill surrounded by trees and a tall wall. Our meeting was just to have a smoke, get a little high, and to have some small catch-up. This meetup was fine. I had actually started smoking weed a few months before, so I was still relatively new to it. He had brought something new for me to try, purple haze. I wasn't all that anxious about trying it, as I completely trusted this person and would never believe that he would lie to me. He had packed a full blunt for me, but I only managed to smoke a quarter of the blunt. We spoke during this time about work, our previous relationships, and random stuff. About half an hour later, I started to feel extremely lightheaded and anxious. I suddenly had this strange feeling where I did not feel comfortable at all, and I really wanted to go home. When I asked if I could go home, he offered to take me home, but I said no, it's okay. He offered again, please let me take you home. You'll be safe with me. I would not hurt you. I shook my head and said, no thank you, I can take myself home. When I started to walk away, I felt like I was walking on a cloud. My head became dizzy, and my eyesight was a little blurry. I had never felt this way before, and in time I started to panic. When we made our way down the hill toward the bus station, I was relieved as there were a lot of people around, so if anything happened, someone would step in. I became extremely terrified of him. I had this horrible feeling in my gut that he told me to get away from him when I got into the bus station. I told him I would call my taxi here and go home. His tone was no longer nice, but very stern. I'm going to take you home. And he began to pull at my jacket. I told him no, and that I was going home on my own. He pulled my jacket harder, and I fell against him. He pulled me into him and told me I didn't need to be scared of him. But I was so terrified at this point. I started to feel very paranoid, and I couldn't see properly. I pushed him away from me and rubbed my eyes and called for a taxi. He tried to pull my phone from me and yelled in my face, do you ever listen? I'm taking you home. I noticed a few people had stopped and asked if I was okay. All I remember was that I wanted to go home, so a lady kindly called a taxi for me and waited with me, made sure I was okay, and helped me into the taxi. During the time when I waited for the taxi, he kept trying to get me to come home in his car with him. But the lady looked after me, told him to go home, and that she was going to take me home instead. So he left. I got home. I gave the taxi driver money and told him to keep the change. I didn't want to wait around. I just wanted to get into my bed, because at the time, it was the only place I would feel and be safe from harm. That evening, I laid in my bed for 5 hours straight, staring at the ceiling. I don't remember if I thought about anything, or if my mom came in at any time. I just remember laying in bed, doing nothing until the paranoia and the sickly feeling began to wear off. I remember looking at my phone and seeing I had 32 missed calls from him, 10 voicemails left, and 50 plus text messages. The messages were weird. He had sent around 20 messages just asking where I was and when I got home, and in one of the voicemails, he had told me about how he had this fantasy of taking me home whilst drugged up and tying me up. He wanted to blindfold me and he wanted me to submit to him. I freaked out and blocked him on all of my social media, Instagram, Snapchat, Discord, and I blocked his number. Before the blocking, I told him if he ever contacted me again, then I would call the police. I heard nothing from him for a month until I realized a text from an unknown number asking me how I was. I hadn't given my number to anyone, so I ignored it. I then received another message a few minutes later saying that they missed me and that they would love to see me soon. I asked who they were. No reply. Nothing. So creepy person who pretended to be my friend. Let's never meet again. I apologize if this gets lengthy. There's a lot to unpack here. This happened to one of my best friends and I back in 2017. I feel like it's worth sharing. Some backstory. My best friend, Elise, was dating this guy, Mark, in 2016. They broke up right after New Year's was approaching. I've known Elise for over a decade, but we didn't talk much while they were together. I ran into them once at a local coffee shop, hugged her, and was chatting away while Mark stared at me in disgust, as if Elise wasn't allowed to talk to her friends at the time. I thought nothing of it, assuming he was just antisocial. I had no idea he would go on to ruin an entire year of my life. It's really fuzzy as to how Mark got into contact with me specifically. I believe Elise posted about her breakup, and I offered my support publicly, so he targeted me. It began on New Year's Eve. He started messaging me on Instagram over and over, threatening me. I was having a get-together with my then-boyfriend, two of my now ex-best friends, and my now ex-best friend's boyfriend. I remember seeing my notifications blowing up and ignoring it. Everyone else seemed more concerned than I was. I brushed it off until late that next day. I checked my phone and I had dozens of DMs from Mark, as well as a few public posts that he had tagged Elise and I in, calling us every name in the book and claiming I was the reason they broke up. I answered his DMs asking why he was targeting me. That was the biggest mistake I had ever made. After some angry messages from him, he blocked me, and I thought it was over. I also had several missed calls from Elise, so I finally contacted her and asked what was going on. She frantically told me that Mark was a dangerous man and that he's been tormenting her since the day they became a couple. He would throw her around in his apartment, leaving awful bruises that she sent me photos of. He would threaten to commit suicide if she left him, and he even threw a hissy fit at a tattoo shop because they wouldn't tattoo Elise's first and middle name over his eyebrow. He got Crybaby instead, fitting. Elise also informed me that Mark had gone to jail before meeting her for domestic abuse. He stabbed his ex-girlfriend in the leg and was only behind bars for a month before his dad bailed him out. With this new information, I was terrified. Elise told me where he lived, and it was directly behind the coffee shop I mentioned earlier. I frequented that building and that part of town in general. That'll come into play later. I eventually calmed myself down and forgot about him until he got my phone number. I still don't know how he got it, but I woke up to 30-plus messages from him one day and was horrified. His messages included threats to kill himself if I didn't help him and Elise get back together, threats to kill me, cries for help, him blocking my number and then unblocking it just to start the cycle all over again. I, being very naive and not wanting to be held responsible if he actually killed himself, did not block him. I asked him to leave me alone and if he wanted a number to a hotline where he could get some help, and he pretended to calm down for a bit. I gave him the number after many messages from him saying how much he missed Elise but also wanted to kill her. I told her immediately and pushed her to go to the police. She did not. He conditioned her to believe that she would get in trouble if she reported him. This went on for months. I usually didn't respond, and when I did, he seemed to chill out for a bit. I'm skipping ahead to a particular night where Elise and I were hanging out at my house, where we were chatting away. When my phone started to light up, I ignored it and kept talking because I didn't want to be rude. Elise peeked at my phone and said, "It's Mark, look." Sure enough, Mark was bombing my phone with threats to slit his own throat because he knew Lee's was at my house, calling us both cunts and claiming it would be our fault if he died that night. I did not answer, but what came next is something that still haunts me to this day. He sent a video. Being curious, I clicked on it. Elise watching over my shoulder. The video was of Mark's arm, a huge gash going down the middle. He was fake crying in the background, saying, "You made me do this. I fucking hate you both." He clenched his fist over and over again to make more blood gush out. Elise and I were in such shock that we watched the entire 50-second clip, despite how disturbing it was. I immediately called my local police station. Elise gave them his address, and an officer came to my house to view the video and take down some notes. While we waited for the police to arrive, Mark posted the gruesome video to his Instagram and unblocked Elise and I just to tag us in it, claiming that we told him to do it. Being a conversational, attractive guy with an e-boy aesthetic, the girls that swooned over him commented some pretty harsh things about us and kissed his ass like crazy. He was admitted to the hospital that night, and I wish they kept him. The harassment continued the second he got out. Time traveling a little more now to a few months later. Mark hadn't let up, and Elise and I were still very close. We had a friend, Kayla, visiting from across the country. She also had a run-in online with Mark and hated him, but wasn't afraid of him. She was always carrying more than one weapon, some pepper spray, and she knew how to fight. So she suggested we go take a walk in the part of town he lived in. She wanted to visit that coffee shop, see some of our small businesses, and then grab dinner at a pizzeria. Elise and I reluctantly agreed. We parked in front of the coffee shop, grabbed some drinks, and started walking down the road. Within about 5 minutes, Mark drove by on one of his motorcycles. Elise and Kayla were immersed in conversation as I trailed behind. I looked up and made eye contact with Mark. Elise and Kayla noticed him as well as he was speeding off. Kayla assured us he wouldn't get anywhere near us with her around, so we kept walking. Mark began cycling the block. We were walking on with his bike. As we crossed to the next block, he switched to that block and circled it too. On the third block was the pizzeria place. Their walls are all glass, all see-through, of course. We went in and were seated in the corner, right next to the glass. We sat there for about an hour and a half, eating, talking, and sipping on soda. Mark circled the restaurant the entire time, and we did our best to ignore him. Once we were finished, we got up to leave. Mark sped off, and we didn't see him again that evening. Some time passed, and Mark began riding by Elise's house every night. Within a week, he started doing the same to me. I told my parents and my stepfather, who kept a close eye on our street. My mom always made sure our doors and windows were locked, shades were shut, etc. Before going to bed, my dad would even do a nightly patrol, where he would drive around my street for a few minutes on his way home from work. Since he no longer lived there, he would call me and let me know that the coast was clear as he was leaving. I still woke up almost every night to the sound of his motorcycle engine revving up outside my house. We had no proof of this to show to the police because he was somehow doing this without a trace, so we didn't bother reporting it. At the end of 2017, Mark took his motorcycle and sped off to California to avoid the legal trouble he had gotten into there. Elise and I were relieved, to say the least. He still harassed us from time to time, but he never came back. We stopped hearing from him after a while, and we thought nothing of it. Fast forward one last time to September of 2019. Elise and I were out and about, enjoying the sunshine, when she got a phone call. Mark was dead. He had died right after his calls and messages to us had stopped. He got into it with his new drug dealer in Arizona and pissed them off enough for them to come and shoot him. He died instantly. He also caught more than 2 domestic violence charges in California and in Arizona, and was on the run from his warrant. His father told everyone it was an accidental overdose because Mark was known for abusing Xanax and other miscellaneous drugs, but it was to cover his sociopathic son's ass. I'm not sure if Mark's death was his karma or some higher being protecting us and all of the girls he's hurting before and would hurt in the future, but he's gone. We never have to worry about our safety because of him ever again, although seeing photos of him does still give me the creeps. Mark, I don't know where you are, but this world is better off without people like you. I am so glad you are gone. Let's never, ever meet again. During my sophomore year of college, I suddenly had to switch dorms due to housing and residence life at my university being completely assholes to me and a few other student workers. Long story short, I lost my job and had to move in within a day. My parents came 5 states away and made a huge fuss in the housing office, so I was able to get more moving time. This is important later in the story. I used to go on Instagram Live a lot because I am a music minor and practicing in front of an audience helps me improve my piano skills. I guess Instagram had begun offering the feature of showing stories lives on the Explore page, so I ended up getting a lot of views and comments from strangers. Nothing too bad. Usually just song requests that I couldn't fulfill because I had a strict repertoire of my piano professor, or hard eyes from strangers. I used to enjoy the lives until I got a comment from a man who knew the exact location of my university. I never wore any school attire during lives or publicized my location on Instagram, so it made me a little nervous. I stopped doing lives after that for a while, getting caught up in regular work. My major is a pre-law, and figured everything was fine. The guy sent me a few messages offering to take me on a date. A quick scan of his profile made it clear that he was at least 50 years old. I was a freshly 19 at the time and worked as a laborer for the city my university is located near. He asked me several times a day what building my classes were in, if I liked the cafeteria, etc., until I finally got scared and blocked him. Before I blocked him, however, I called him a pervert and a fucking weirdo for being interested in me when I was so much younger than him, and trying to find me while I was trying to go to class. A few weeks later, after I had forgotten about his weird messages, I got a message from him saying something along the lines of, I waited for you in front of your old dorm for a few hours, but you never showed up. Did you go home for the weekend? You shouldn't be so rude to me next time, or else we won't have fun when we meet face to face. It scared me more than I'd ever been scared. My close friend graduated from the university and began working as a campus police officer around the same time, so I went to her to see what I could do. Sadly, not much could have been done, but I definitely pulled back on my social media presence. The guy followed me from 2 more Instagrams with different usernames, and I blocked them all before he could even message me. Thankfully, since leaving after that spring semester, I haven't heard from him or anyone else creepy. So, creepy old guy who thinks he knew where I live, let's not meet again.